You did everything right and still feel invisible. And that quiet frustration follows many capable people into their 30s and 40s. You show up, improve your skills, stay professional, and keep pushing. Yet doors remain closed and invitations never arrive. Meanwhile, someone with less experience, less depth, and less preparation is suddenly inside the room where decisions are made. No one hates you. No one blocks you openly. You are simply unnecessary. That realization hurts because it feels personal, even though it is structural. Power doesn't reject talent. It ignores irrelevance. This video is not here to motivate you or flatter your effort. I am going to give you 9 rules that explain why access works the way it does and why doing things right keeps failing you. Doors don't stay closed because you're unworthy. They stay closed because you're mispositioned. Think about how often you followed the rules, waited your turn, trusted merit, and assumed someone would notice. Think about how often nothing happened. The problem is not your ability. It is your placement inside a system that rewards usefulness, timing, and fit over sincerity. Once you see this, confusion turns into clarity. You stop blaming yourself and start questioning the mechanics. That shift matters, because understanding how connection really works is the difference between standing outside forever and learning how entry actually happens. Comment outside if this feels uncomfortably familiar. Stay with me, because the rules ahead explain who gets chosen and why others are quietly filtered out. Before we go any further, we need to reset how you think about connection, because goodwill is not the currency that moves power. Niccolo Machiavelli was not urging cruelty. He was observing patterns inside courts where survival depended on accuracy, not kindness. What he saw still applies. Power is selective. It filters people the way systems filter noise, keeping what reduces friction and discarding what adds it. Connection at higher levels is never random. It is engineered, protected, and earned through fit. That is why this is not a video about networking tips, charisma, or being liked. Those ideas work in social spaces, not in arenas where decisions carry risk. Power is not social. It's selective. Access is granted, never given. Once you accept that frame, rejection stops feeling personal and starts feeling mechanical. Silence becomes information. Distance becomes data. You realize the world you are trying to enter has rules that reward alignment, timing, and utility, not sincerity alone. This lens is not pessimistic, it is stabilizing. It removes resentment and replaces it with clarity. You stop hoping doors will open out of fairness and start learning why some doors never open at all. This lens grounds everything ahead. Once you understand that power filters instead of welcomes, the first of the 9 laws becomes obvious. Most people are rejected before they ever speak. The real problem is not bad luck. It is behavior that signals low leverage. You approach like a fan, grateful for attention, praising resumes, oversharing enthusiasm. You talk too much about yourself, your story, your struggle, your vision. Hoping connection comes from exposure. You lean on potential, asking for help because you could become something later. This happens every day in LinkedIn DMs that start with compliments and end with silence. In coffee chats where you pitch your life instead of value. In networking events where everyone begs for minutes instead of earning interest. Power reads these signals instantly. Neediness equals invisibility. The moment you need something, you lose leverage, because need announces weakness before value arrives. Potential does not open doors, utility does. Think about the colleague who never asks for favors, yet always gets invited, or the consultant who brings one clear solution and leaves before overstaying. They are not louder, smarter, or luckier. They simply remove friction instead of creating it. These 9 laws exist because power avoids effort and rewards relief. So far, you have seen why effort gets filtered out and why goodwill fails near power. And now the 9 laws matter. They will not make you admired or popular, but they will show you how access is built before anyone notices. These laws help you move from confusion to positioning, from chasing to alignment, and from being overlooked to becoming relevant. This is the shift that changes everything now. Law 1. Become useful before you become close. Power does not care about your dreams, your vision, or what you might become someday. It cares about weight, pressure, and problems that need removing right now. I once watched a junior analyst get invited into rooms he was never supposed to enter. Not because he asked, not because he impressed anyone with ambition, but because he quietly fixed one annoying issue everyone hated dealing with. He prepared documents before meetings, caught errors early, and made decisions easier. And nobody noticed him until suddenly nobody could function without him. That is how access actually begins. Not through charm, not through proximity, but through relief. Most people approach power like fans, pitching ideas, sharing goals, explaining potential, hoping to be seen. The strategic do the opposite. They study first. They look for friction. They ask where energy is being wasted and step in without announcement. Power does not reward excitement. It rewards reduced burden. Think about the colleague who shows up with solutions instead of questions, or the freelancer who prevents one small risk before it becomes a crisis. They are remembered because they make life lighter. The strategic do not ask for attention. They create reasons. When you solve a real problem, you bypass defenses without asking permission. This is not servitude, it is positioning. You are not trying to be liked, you are trying to be relied on. Power remembers those who lower stress and forgets those who add noise. Be remembered as relief, not noise, because usefulness is the first currency that buys proximity. This is why small actions beat big speeches every time. A manager drowning in emails does not need your passion. He needs one less decision on his desk. An executive under pressure does not need loyalty promises. She needs a risk removed quietly. When you bring that kind of value, your presence stops being optional. You are no longer chasing connection. Connection adjusts around you. This law sounds simple, but it demands humility and patience. You must give without applause and wait without resentment. Yet this is how proximity is earned in environments where attention is expensive and trust is scarce. It reshapes how you are perceived before you ever speak, and it sets the foundation for every rule that follows. Without usefulness, nothing else works, and with it, everything else becomes easier to execute under pressure. That is the quiet entry point power never announces, but always respects and remembers long after first impressions fade. Law 2. Never reveal your full hand. The moment you explain everything about yourself, you become easy to read. And what is easy to read is easy to manage. People who talk openly believe clarity builds trust, but in environments shaped by power, clarity often builds control. Think about a job interview where a candidate lays out every plan, timeline, and ambition, leaving nothing hidden while another speaks with intention, answers directly, yet keeps future moves undefined. One feels exposed, the other feels composed. At a networking dinner, the same pattern appears. One person overshares goals, frustrations, and next steps, hoping honesty creates connection. Another stays warm but vague, discussing direction without dates, interests without strategy, momentum without maps. Guess who is respected more? The man who reveals everything becomes predictable, and predictability invites influence. The man who withholds selectively creates space, and space creates gravity. This is not about deception, it is about protection. You are not lying, you are pacing information. Speak in generalities when asked about long-term plans. Avoid timelines that lock you into expectations you cannot control. Never announce strategies that are still forming. Let results speak before explanations do. When others push for details, redirect calmly and keep moving. Silence does not weaken you. It strengthens your position. Clarity attracts control. Mystery attracts respect. Power leans toward what it cannot fully measure. This is why senior figures share less as they rise, not more. They understand that every unnecessary detail becomes leverage for someone else. You do not need to be secretive or cold, only disciplined. Share enough to function, not enough to be managed. When you keep part of yourself unreadable, conversations shift. People listen more carefully. They stop trying to steer you and start observing you. This law works quietly, but it compounds. The less you reveal, the less others assume authority over your direction, and the more room you keep to maneuver when circumstances change without warning. It buys time, protects options, and prevents premature judgments, especially in early relationships where impressions harden fast and rarely soften later. Because once people think they know you, they stop listening, stop questioning, and start deciding where you belong long before you have finished building leverage through patience, restraint, and disciplined emotional control consistently. Law 3. Never walk through the front door. The front door is where everyone lines up, announces themselves, and waits to be judged. And that is exactly why it is designed to reject you. This is the front door trap. It looks official, fair, and open. But it is guarded by filters meant to absorb noise, not invite talent. When you apply directly, pitch openly, or request time from the top, you are competing with hundreds of similar asks, and power treats all of them as friction. The strategic path is always sideways. Think about the assistant who controls the calendar, the partner who filters ideas before they reach the decision maker, or the trusted inner circle member who is not famous but always present. These are not obstacles. They are access points. I once watched someone enter a closed industry without credentials or introductions simply by becoming reliable to an executive assistant who needed problems handled without drama. Months later, his name was already familiar before he ever shook hands with the person in charge. Reputation walks in before you do. This is how access actually forms. You build familiarity in the outer rings until your presence feels normal instead of intrusive. The impatient knock on the main gate and wonder why nothing opens. The strategic circulate quietly, adding value in places others ignore. They become known without being visible. When your name is mentioned casually in rooms you are not in, resistance drops. By the time you appear, you are no longer an interruption. You are a continuation of a conversation already happening. That is the difference between forcing entry and being expected. This approach requires patience and humility, because it offers no instant validation. You may never know when the shift happens, only that one day the room feels easier to enter. The side door is rarely marked, and it never feels impressive while you are using it. But it bypasses defenses that crush direct approaches every day. Power prefers what arrives indirectly because it feels safer, tested, and socially approved. Learn to move through networks instead of against them. Learn to be mentioned before you are seen. The impatient knock, the strategic circulate, Comment side door if you see the pattern now. Law 4. Mirror their world, not your own. After you learn to enter quietly, the next filter you face is belonging. And this is where most capable people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They speak from their reality, their pace, their values, expecting power to meet them halfway. It never does. This is not about pretending to be someone else. It is about intelligent adaptation. Think about a meeting where one person speaks quickly, uses casual language, jumps between ideas, while the room moves slowly, precisely, and with measured tone. Nothing they say is wrong, but nothing lands. Contrast that with someone who adjusts vocabulary, matches rhythm, and frames ideas around the concerns already present. The second person feels familiar, not impressive, and familiarity is what lowers resistance. Language matters. If they speak in outcomes, speak in outcomes. If they care about risk, address risk. If they value brevity, respect time. The same applies to energy. Some rooms reward calm certainty, others reward controlled urgency. Watch before you act. Listen before you lead. Mirroring works because people trust what feels like them. This is not manipulation, it is recognition. Think about the consultant who wins repeat work not because of genius, but because conversations feel effortless. Or the junior employee who advances because leadership never has to translate what they say. They fit the environment without announcing it. Adaptation is not betrayal. It is intelligence. Refusing to adjust is not authenticity. It is stubbornness disguised as principle. Power does not elevate those who demand to be understood. It elevates those who make understanding easy. This requires restraint, because your instinct will be to prove identity, originality, depth. Resist it. Belonging comes before influence. When you mirror the world you want access to, you stop feeling foreign inside it. Conversations smooth out, feedback improves, doors open with less friction. You are not losing yourself, you are choosing context over ego. This law compounds quietly. Each interaction becomes simpler. Each exchange carries less tension. Over time, people stop noticing your adjustment and start assuming you belong there naturally. That assumption is powerful. It turns scrutiny into trust and curiosity into comfort. Once that happens, you are no longer adapting consciously. You are operating fluently inside a system that once felt closed. And fluency, more than brilliance, is what keeps you inside rooms long enough to matter when decisions are made. Law 5. Practice selective availability. Being always available feels generous, but in power dynamics, it quietly signals that your time has no demand. Many capable people think instant replies prove commitment, so they answer every message, show up to every invite, and rearrange schedules at a moment's notice. What they do not see is how this erodes perceived value. Think about the colleague who replies within seconds to every email versus the one who responds later with clarity and direction. One feels busy, the other feels important. Scarcity shapes attention. When you delay a response, you communicate that your focus is allocated, not idle. When you do not appear at every event, your presence stops being assumed and starts being noticed. Absence creates contrast, and contrast creates value. This does not mean playing games or being unreliable. It means choosing when to engage instead of reacting automatically. Power respects boundaries more than eagerness. Consider a consultant who schedules limited windows, or an executive who is warm but unreachable without purpose. Their availability feels earned, not consumed. Presence is powerful only when absence is possible. Constant proximity dulls impact, while distance sharpens it. When you step back strategically, people adjust. They prepare better. They speak more clearly. They value the time they get. The dynamic shifts without confrontation. Instead of chasing attention, attention begins to organize around you. This law is uncomfortable because it requires restraint. You must tolerate unanswered messages, missed moments, and the anxiety of not being visible. Yet visibility without leverage is noise. Selective availability protects your energy and elevates your position at the same time. Over time, people learn that access to you has weight. That lesson spreads quietly. Meetings shorten. Requests become clearer. Respect increases without explanation. You are not withdrawing, you are calibrating. And calibration is what separates those who are used from those who are sought after when stakes rise and decisions matter. At higher levels, silence, spacing, and selectivity signal confidence long before results appear. Teaching others to treat your time as scarce capital, rather than a free resource that can be spent carelessly whenever convenience demands it. This shift protects focus, restores leverage, and quietly rewires relationships so that engagement feels intentional, mutual, and grounded in respect rather than habit alone now. Law 6. Speak less than necessary. The more you talk, the more you reveal. And most people expose themselves long before they realize it. In rooms where power operates, words are not used to impress, they are used to position. Think about a meeting where one person fills every silence, explaining, justifying, clarifying, trying to sound sharp, while another listens, nods, and waits. The first leaks intent, insecurity, and limits. The second gathers leverage. Silence creates pressure because people hate empty space. When you do not rush to fill it, others begin talking, explaining, defending, and exposing what actually matters to them. This is not intimidation, it is patience. In boardrooms, the quiet person is often mistaken for the least involved, until decisions align with what they observed rather than what they announced. Noise feels active, but it is sloppy. Silence feels passive, but it is precise. Speak only when your words add direction, not volume. Ask fewer questions, but better ones. Answer without decoration. Let pauses stretch without apology. Silence collects information. Noise leaks it. This discipline is difficult because talking feels safe. It feels like control. In reality, control comes from restraint. The more you speak, the easier it is to categorize you. The less you speak, the harder you are to predict. Power respects what it cannot easily read. Think of the manager who waits until the end to summarize, or the negotiator who lets the other side fill the gap. They are not slower, they are sharper. When you practice strategic silence, conversations change shape. People listen more carefully when you do speak. Your words land heavier because they are rare. Over time, others begin to check themselves around you, unsure of what you have noticed. That uncertainty is influence. You do not need to dominate rooms to control outcomes. You need to observe, select, and release words with intent. Silence is not emptiness. It is a container. And those who learn to hold it gain an advantage that cannot be copied through confidence, charisma, or volume alone, especially in environments where attention is expensive and mistakes echo longer than applause ever does afterward for years. Law 7. Never threaten their ego. This is the trap smart people fall into, because competence creates temptation. When you see a mistake, you want to fix it. When you see a better path, you want to point it out. And when you do this around power, especially in public, you quietly sign your own removal. Think about the employee who corrects their boss in a meeting, not aggressively, not rudely, just accurately. The room goes quiet. The point is valid. the damage is done. Ego is the real gatekeeper. Power is built on identity, not logic, and identity does not forgive embarrassment. This law is not about playing small, it is about playing long. You do not win influence by proving you are smarter, you win it by making others feel secure in their position. The most effective operators understand this instinctively. They offer insights privately. They frame ideas as extensions, not contradictions. They ask questions that guide conclusions instead of announcing answers. When credit appears, they let it land where it protects hierarchy. This is why great advisors whisper and weak ones perform. Consider the consultant who sends a quiet follow-up instead of challenging leadership in the room, or the partner who lets a superior present the solution as their own. Their ego survives, and your access deepens. Your intelligence does not disappear, it compounds invisibly. Recognition delayed is leverage preserved. This requires swallowing pride and resisting the urge to display dominance when emotions run hot or stakes feel personal. Your instinct will resist. You will feel unseen. But understand the trade. A threatened ego never forgets, and it always retaliates eventually, sometimes subtly through stalled support, blocked visibility, or quiet exclusion over time. Protect their image, and you protect your position. Make them look capable, and you become indispensable. This is not submission. It is strategic patience. Once your value is embedded and removal becomes costly, credit finds its way back to you naturally. Until then, let results speak quietly and let others shine publicly. That restraint is what keeps you inside the room long enough to matter when decisions harden and alliances are tested under pressure. This discipline separates operators from performers, because operators trade momentary validation for durable access, while performers chase applause and lose influence, unaware that every public correction, clever remark, or visible win quietly shortens their time near power without any warning signs, and closes future doors permanently without appeal later. Comment ego check if this one hit harder than expected. Law 8. Make others come to you. Chasing power announces need, and need collapses leverage before the conversation begins. Attraction works in reverse. You build something quietly useful, and attention reorganizes around it. This does not mean waiting passively or hoping to be discovered. It means producing results that travel without you. Think about the engineer whose fixes get mentioned across teams, or the advisor whose frameworks keep getting reused long after meetings end. Their work creates echoes. Results turn into reputation, and reputation turns into invitations. When people talk about outcomes instead of effort, curiosity follows naturally. This is why cold outreach feels heavy, while warm introductions feel inevitable. One is noise, the other is momentum. To make others come to you, focus on assets that signal competence without explanation. Publish clear thinking. Solve visible problems. Leave trails of reliability that others can point to. Then step back. Let the signal circulate. Chasing is loud. Attraction is quiet. Notice how power responds differently when it approaches you. Questions change tone. Meetings feel shorter. Negotiations start closer to your terms. This shift requires faith because it delays gratification. You will watch others beg for access and get crumbs while you stay focused on building. Resist comparison. The magnet is forged through consistency, not theatrics. Consider the freelancer who declines low-value work to refine one signature solution, or the manager who fixes one metric so well that leadership keeps asking for their input. They did not ask to be seen. They became hard to ignore. When you stop chasing rooms, rooms start forming around what you do. Invitations arrive with context attached. People already know why you are there. This is the safest position near power because it is earned, not granted. If attention fades, you return to building instead of begging. That loop protects dignity and leverage. Make your work legible. Make your standards visible. Let others do the reaching. Over time, attraction compounds because reputation scales while pursuit exhausts. The quiet builder wins because the signal keeps moving even when they are not in the room. And when the door opens, it opens toward them, not away. Patience becomes leverage here because consistency builds trust faster than charm. And trust converts into access when stakes rise, budgets tighten, and leaders need certainty, not excitement, from people they can rely on, under pressure across changing conditions without constant reassurance. Law 9. Guard your reputation like an asset, because it enters rooms before you do and speaks when you are silent. In environments shaped by power, perception hardens faster than truth. And once a story forms, it becomes difficult to reverse. You can lose money and earn it back. You can miss opportunities and find new ones. But one careless moment, one association with the wrong person, or one public mistake can cost you years of quiet rebuilding. But think about the professional who became known as unreliable after a single missed deadline, or the manager whose credibility collapsed after one emotional outburst in front of leadership. The details fade, but the label stays. Reputation works like compound interest, for better or worse. Every action adds to it. Every interaction either strengthens or weakens it. This is why disciplined people move carefully when stakes are high. They avoid unnecessary drama. They choose alliances with intention. They correct errors quickly and privately before narratives spread. Power does not investigate deeply. It listens to consensus. What people believe about you becomes more important than what is technically true. Money can be rebuilt. Reputation rarely is. This does not mean living in fear or perfectionism. It means understanding that visibility amplifies consequences. As your access grows, tolerance for mistakes shrinks. Guarding your name is not vanity, it is risk management. When rumors appear, address them early. When mistakes happen, own them decisively and move forward. When others try to pull you into questionable behavior, decline without explanation. Over time, people learn what to expect from you, and that expectation becomes safety. Safety is what power values most. A protected reputation opens doors without effort because trust travels faster than introductions. Lose it, and every future move becomes heavier, slower, and met with suspicion, forcing you to prove yourself repeatedly instead of building momentum quietly where it actually counts. This law rewards patience, consistency, and restraint, punishing impulse, shortcuts, and public ego, because in the long run, power trusts patterns, not apologies, and it remembers behavior long after excuses, explanations, and good intentions have completely disappeared from memory forever in competitive environments everywhere today, globally. Power does not hate you. It simply has no use for you yet. And that realization is unsettling because it removes the comfort of blame. Machiavelli understood this long before modern careers existed, not as a moral lesson, but as a cold observation of how influence survives pressure. These 9 laws are not instructions to become cruel, and they are not excuses to abandon values. They are a map of the rules already being followed without you. When you stop moralizing power, resentment drains out and clarity takes its place. You stop asking why effort is ignored and start noticing what behavior gets rewarded. Power doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards correct behavior. That sentence feels harsh until you realize it gives you control back. You are no longer confused, only misaligned. Understanding the game doesn't make you evil. It makes you effective. Effective enough to choose when to engage, when to withdraw, and when to build quietly. Once it clicks, you cannot unsee it, and you stop waiting for fairness to arrive. Comment power recognized if that shift just happened. Subscribe if you want to learn how influence actually works, not how people pretend it does from now on.